Shua Tov, everyone. Welcome to Saturday Night Live, or should I say Saturday Night Virtual. And it's very exciting. This is the first video in our new series, and I have a very interesting story. It's from my third book, By the Light of the Full Moon, and it connects nicely to the Torah reading that was read in Shabbat this morning, even if it was not in Shul that it was read. That at the end of chapter 17, there's a bit of review of the laws of kashrut, which is an important element in the story I'm about to tell. And then right away at the beginning of chapter 18 is a preview of a warning against not indulging in non-Jewish practices and non-Jewish solutions to problems. Also, it ties into the Jewish month. We're now at the end of the first full week of the month of Iyar. Iyar is spelled in Hebrew Aleph Yud Yud Reish, where Yud Yud is a common abbreviation for the four-letter name of God. So therefore, Aleph Yud Yud Reish stands for Ani Hashem Rofecha. I, Hashem, am your healer. Iyar is the month of healing. And I mentioned this in the audio story that I posted a bit earlier. So this story starts in Israel, where a young couple named Yigal and Nechama, both of whom grew up on irreligious left-wing kibbutzes and had no real identification or interest in the Jewish religion. They had two small children, Eitan and Michal, and at a certain point they decided to leave Israel and move to America to seek their fortune, along with many other Israelis. But they didn't go to Los Angeles. They went to Minnesota. They settled in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis. And for several years, things went very well. They lived simple, normal, satisfying American-style lives. But then, in the 1970s, some point in the 1970s, a very bizarre situation developed. Nechama, the wife, the mother, she began to have hallucinations, serious hallucinations. They would last for an hour or 2 hours, and her behavior would be very unpredictable and wild while she was having these hallucinations, and afterwards she wouldn't even remember what had happened. She had no idea what was going on. But she said that when the attacks came, she felt like a powerful force. It was a powerful force, like an unidentifiable alien being or something. It was possessing her and compelling this crazy behavior, and she was helpless to resist it. Well, they went to doctors. They went to many doctors, but not one could diagnose the cause of the problem or what to do about it. The situation continued. It got worse and worse. And it became unsafe for the children to be home in the house with her alone, when she was under the spell, so to speak, of one of her hallucinations. And she herself was becoming more and more tense because she never knew when one of these attacks would come, and she had no idea what to do about them. And for her husband, Yigal, it was very difficult as well. He worked full-time in order to support the family, but now he had another full-time job. He had to be a full-time father at home, the primary caretaker for the children, because he couldn't leave them alone with their mother. Nechama, in her desperation, decided to consult with a rabbi, even though she had no experience with rabbis at all. But several of her friends had told her about Rabbi Manis Friedman, who today is a very famous speaker in the Jewish world, but then was teaching in the Rabbi Moshe Feller's Seminary for Women, and including the special summer program that went on there. So she got in touch with him and asked him, begged him to help her. He said, look, I'm not a doctor. I can't give you medical advice, and I'm not a sorcerer. I don't have magical powers, but I can give you some good advice. I am a chassid, a follower of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe lives in Brooklyn, New York, and I think you should write a detailed letter to him describing your situation, and perhaps he will be able to help you to remedy this disastrous illness. So they did so. Nechama and Yigal, they sat down. They wrote a lengthy, imploring letter to the Rebbe to help them. And soon thereafter, they received an answer. The Rebbe told them, it was a very brief answer. He told them they should make their kitchen kosher, and they should take on to eat only kosher food. Not just she, but also he and the children. And he said if they would, then they could be sure that the hallucinations would stop. Well, Nechama and Yigal had opposite reactions. She was excited. She felt that finally it was the first time she felt any hope. It was like being thrown a life preserver while flailing in the ocean. She arranged with Rabbi Friedman's wife, his wife Hannah, to study the laws of kashrut. And she told her that growing up in the kibbutz, she'd never known anything about kashrut. And Mrs. Friedman encouraged her very much. Not said she shouldn't be discouraged. She has no experience with it. She would teach her, and they had a schedule of classes where she taught her the laws of kashrut. And Nechama was an enthusiastic student, and within a relatively short time, she did everything she had to do to make her kitchen kosher. The sinks, the pots, the dishes, the appliances, and she changed her shopping habits, especially her food purchasing habits, and she would buy only the products that had kosher certification. Also something Mrs. Friedman taught her how to identify. Yigal, on the other hand, was not happy with what was going on, and he wasn't comfortable with this idea of all of a sudden becoming 100% kosher. He was willing to go along with it in the house. His wife is ill. His wife is desperate. The doctors can't help. So we understood it's worthwhile to try every possibility, but enough is enough. He didn't quibble about eating only what his wife served him, but out of the house he wasn't prepared to restrict himself. But he was also worried. This was such a big change in their lives, the way she had switched over so suddenly and became 100% kosher. Who knows what this would lead to? She might even become religious. Then what would that be with them? So he was also very tense from the pressures of his wife's illness, from the pressures of having to be a primary caretaker, from the pressures of maintaining his working schedule. And one day, just to relax, he went out with a group of friends from work, and they were sitting and talking. And one of them mentioned that he had heard about this elderly Gentile woman who lived in their region in the Midwestern United States, and that it said that she could work miracles. She was even said to be psychic. She could predict the future. Yigal became excited. Maybe this would be the solution to his wife's problems. The others, it was a discussion. They were sitting there talking about whether this could possibly be true, whether it's not true, whether it is true, and he was no longer paying attention. He had already decided he is going to seek out this woman and try to get her to help them. Why not? What else was there to do? So the next day, he got in his car. He took the day off from work. He got in his car and he drove to where she lives. It was a drive of several hours, much further south from Minnesota in the Midwest. And he found her, and she invited him in. And he described her in detail the situation, that is, his wife's strange hallucinations and the effects that they were having on the family. He finished telling her, and she stared at him. And she looked him directly in the eyes, and she said, "Aren't you Jewish?" He was very startled. What does that have to do with anything? Why is she asking him this? But he had to admit he was. He said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." Whereupon she said, "Well, what did you come to me for? Why don't you go to that great rabbi in New York who cares so much about every single Jewish person? And anyway, his powers are much greater than my powers. I'm sure he would be able to help you." Yigal was stunned. This was the last thing he expected to hear. He could barely believe he heard it. Here's this woman who's supposed to have great powers. She admits she has powers, and yet she's telling him to go to the rabbi. He can't understand this, but he doesn't want to give up on this possibility. So he says to her, he finally gets himself together and he says to her, "Look, you don't understand. This diet. It's very complicated. It's not just what you can eat and you can't eat. You have to there's special ways to prepare things. You have to worry about problems with the dishes, problems with the pots, problems with appliances. You can't eat in restaurants." And anyway, and all of a sudden he stopped. She was staring at him with a very puzzled look. He gulped. Their lives were being destroyed by this mysterious, dangerous ailment of his wife, and he's being so resistant to a few inconveniences. After all, that's all it is, inconveniences, not being able to eat Chinese food at a restaurant or whatever. And so he thanked the woman, he left, he went back home, and he told Nechama that now he's 100% with her, he'll eat only kosher outside of the house as well. And that's what he did, and soon after the hallucination stopped, completely. Things became normal at home again. Time passed, months, years, the children were growing up. They barely remembered all of the extreme difficulties that happened so many years ago with her strange hallucinations. And the only memento, the only physical presence that they had of what had happened all those years ago was in their salon, in their living room, was hanging a portrait of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Many are the messengers of God.